Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me-
anyone have an answer?
Well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, my name is DJ. You're watching the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and a long time ago, I put out a video where I had you building your commander collection on the cheap. That's 100 staple cards for your commander deck for under $25. Unfortunately, that old list, although there's some great cards in there, has doubled in price. It's over $50 now for those 100 cards. And so some of them might just be out of our budget. But of course, there are so many new staples for Commander, so I want to do it again. Another 100 cards to build your Commander collection from scratch, all under $25. These are all super budget, and if you combine it with the old list, you're having a robust Commander collection on the cheap. So in this video, we're going to be covering 100 cards, which means that I'm going to be talking about them very quickly. So I apologize if I don't go into them in deep detail, but this is going to be fun and a whirlwind trip through 100 cheap cards. Let's get started. Let's start off with some colorless ramped Burnished Heart and gets lands out of your deck and onto the battlefield. That's the best kind of ramp in the game. Palladium Myrrh is 3 mana for 2 ramp. That's pretty good. Let's continue with artifact creatures. Blade Gryph Prototype. It's 5 mana for a 3/2 flyer, which feels like a horrible rate, and that is, but it's this political ability to smack someone and destroy something important. I mean, if you kill 2 or 3 things with this, then it is amazing, way better than a Meteor Golem. Next up is Ebony Fly. 2 mana ramp is invaluable, but boosting a relevant creature into the air to get in for damage is going to be really great. Next, let's talk about big mana ramp, Empowered Auto Generator. I fell in love with this with the Live the Dream Cube. It's especially good with tapping and untapping shenanigans, but eventually this can get up to tapping for 5 or 6 mana, and that's the big mana you want in commander decks. Now, equipment is usually really expensive, and the best pieces of equipment are, but I've been really impressed by a card like Heirloom Blade. I feel like people want to stick it in tribal decks, but it can just go in decks, and it can get you to your next creature. It's been really solid in a lot of my builds. And then finally, Claw. Being able to smash someone and cut their life in half means that this can sometimes be a huge pump to a creature's power. Rounding out my artifacts, I have Mimic Vat. This used to be an all-star and an expensive card, but reprinting over and over again has driven the price down. It's incredibly reasonable, and being able to get the ETB effects of your opponent's creatures is just great, especially when they're playing expensive creatures. Finally, we have Nivinral's Disc. Board wipes used to be pretty expensive, and there are a lot more of them in the budget range on this list. Nivinral's list is really solid because it takes out artifacts, enchantments, creatures. You can make Nivinral's Disc indestructible and start locking down the battlefield, or you can play a card type like Planeswalker and avoid the Nivinral's Disc altogether. Let's go ahead and move on to green cards. I want to talk about Farhaven Elf. A dork that gets land on the battlefield is great, especially when you can use the body. Selesnya Urologist. Eulogist. Selesnya Eulogist is a 3 mana 3/3, but populate can be huge. So if you have relevant tokens, making extra copies is amazing. Some tokens are better to copy than others. I particularly like this token. Spawnwrithe creates copies of itself. I can almost always get damage through in a multiplayer game. And Spawnwrithe is great at holding equipment and just getting out of control. Occame Adversary. This can sometimes come down super duper early depending upon your table, but most importantly is the Death Touch card draw. All it has to do is replace itself or draw an extra card to make it really relevant, and a lot of times your opponents aren't feeling like blocking. Slippery Bogbonder is protection when you need it. Protection's best when it's cheap, and so 4 mana isn't ideal, but I love the continued protection that it gives. It's not just like a one-off indestructible or hexproof. This puts a hexproof token on like your commander, making it difficult to interact with from there on out, and I like that value. Timeless Witness. It costs 1 more mana than Eternal Witness, which is actually really big. When you're rebuying cards or tutoring cards, every mana counts because that's 1 fewer mana you have to deploy the thing you got. But Timeless Witness makes up for it with the fact that you can eternalize it from your graveyard. Rampaging Baloth is great. It only needs 1 land drop to be able to be amazing. 6 mana, 6/6 plus a 4/4, that's like Grave Titan stats right there. So Rampaging Baloth is definitely worth it. Next, we have Sweet Gum Recluse. I think that people don't like it because the cascade makes it unpredictable, and you really want the cascade to go off and add +1/+1 counters to make Sweet Gum Recluse really worth it. But I think that you should embrace the randomness a little bit. This card is fun. And when you have cards that are fun and can be very powerful at the same time, like, that's a good combination for a commander card. Next, we have Beanstalk Giant. Look, it's ramp on the front side, and that's just great. You want ramp in your deck. But being able to play a huge beater in the mid to late game is amazing. Green can often weaponize just big as a creature mechanic. Next, I have a bunch of green spells that help get lands onto the battlefield. Lands on the battlefield is the best type of ramp because your opponents often aren't playing ways to interact with that, whereas they will be playing things to take out mana dorks and artifacts. Harrow and Roiling Rebirth both have you sacrificing a land and searching for 2 more. Instant speed is thumbs up there. Explore is great, draw a card, get your extra land drop so it automatically replaces itself. And then we have Cultivate, 3 mana, basic into your hand, basic on the battlefield tapped. Remember how I mentioned that tutoring effects and rebuy effects are the most effective when they're the cheapest? Well, Road to Return is only 2 mana to get a permanent from your graveyard back to your hand. And that means that you're more likely to be able to instantly deploy that and keep that tempo going. Of course, if you have time and energy, you can also entwine it because that has an added benefit of being able to get your commander from your command zone to your hand. That's very good because that can essentially save you a ton of mana if you need your commander on the battlefield and you cast it several times. Finally, we have the classic Harmonize, 4 mana, draw 3 cards. You like this effect in green. Let's talk about red, Direfleet Daredevil. It's a 2/1 first strike. That's not going to do a lot in Commander, but being able to target your opponent's spells in their graveyards is really good, especially because you can break the color pie by having access to spells you wouldn't normally have. And also, you get to play your opponent's expensive cards while you're just playing a... Now, Captivating Crew is great. Threaten effects can sometimes not work so well in Commander because they're not always going to have really big relevant creatures. But I like Captivating Crew because it lets you threaten over and over again. You can deploy this, threaten 2 or 3 things in a single turn, or just constantly have that threaten threat on the battlefield. I also love Emberwild Captain. The Monarch mechanic is amazing, and sometimes red really wants to punish your opponent's life total, and Emberwild Captain does that really well. Fireflux Squad is another great card because it can weaponize those creatures that are served their use already. That Direfleet Daredevil that already flashed back your opponent's spell, upgrade that into something better with Fireflux Squad. Next up, we have Backdraft Hellkite. I can't believe this card is so cheap. Granted, it only belongs in certain decks. This is just a standard dragon, 5 mana, 4/4 flyer, but whenever it attacks, you get to just flash back all your instants and sorceries. Next, we have Obsidian Charmaw. This preys on your opponent's greed in their mana bases. I oftentimes cast this for red as a 4/4 flyer and blow up something relevant. I don't mind that it doesn't hit basic lands because I'm not trying to mana screw people. I always like destroying those cradles and those utility lands that are designed to get more value out of their mana base. Next up, we have a card that used to be really expensive. People loved it, were crazy about it, and then it got reprinted into Oblivion, and that's okay. Atali Primal Storm, 6 mana, 6/6, attack with it. A lot of times you're getting free spells off the top of everyone's library. All you need is 1 attack for it to replace itself, and the value becomes insane if you can protect it. Next up is Rapacious One, 6 mana, 5/4 trample. That trample's important because when you deal damage to opponent, you create that many 0-run Eldrazi spawn creature tokens. That many is insane because you can double this power, equip it with an equipment, or do anything to augment it, and suddenly you've kind of broken the card. And these spawns are really good. They're better than 1/1s because you can sacrifice them for mana, and there are times in Commander where we'd much rather have big mana than a big board. All right, on to red enchantments. We've got Flame Blitz. 1 red mana for just a you can't play Planeswalkers card. It's insane against some decks. I mean, people play Planeswalkers all the time, and this can just wipe them out. Especially if you're a budget player and you feel like you don't have the money to put Planeswalkers in all your decks and you feel like your friends are. Flame Blitz. Yeah, try and deal with me with your Planeswalkers now because you're going to get 1 activation and they're just going to get blitzed off the battlefield. And when it is not useful, when there aren't Planeswalkers around, cycle it. It's done. It's like the lowest floor ever. Get another card. Flame Blitz is so good. Let's move on to our only red instant, Rites of Initiation. 1 red mana. Combat tricks that cost a little mana are really, really good. So 1 red mana, discard any number of cards at random from your hand, so that's a big cost. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded this way. Wow. So actually, like, the randomness doesn't really matter because this is a finisher card. This is the kind of thing where you pay 1 red mana, discard all 4 cards from your hand because you've just given your whole team +4/+0. That's a huge boost for the mana cost. Next, we have a board wipe in red, chain reaction. A lot of people feel like this isn't gonna clear the board really. They're like, oh no, this won't clear the board. It will clear the board. I've played Massacre Girl and this card enough times to realize that yes, things will die, everything will be okay. Finally in red, we have Surge to Victory, another big red finisher, 6 mana. Oftentimes I'm giving my creatures +4/+0, +7/+0, finishing a game, and if I'm not, I'm getting enough value by casting those spells over and over again to be able to just pull myself into the victory. I'm gonna Surge to Victory. All right, moving on. First up for black, Piper of the Swarm. 2 mana, 1/3, and people really like putting this in tribal rats, and I don't blame them, but this is not just where it belongs. I know it gives your rats menace, whatever, but actually being able to just create sack fodder for 2 mana over and over again is surprisingly good. 1/1 creatures can be used in black really well, and most importantly, it has on it a way to use these rats. 4 tap, sacrifice 3 rats, just gain control of something. Gaining control of an opponent's commander can sometimes just interrupt their whole game plan so much that Piper of the Swarm ends up being invaluable. Of course, if we're talking about rats, Chittering Witch. 4 mana, 2/2, but oftentimes this is bringing 3 rats along with it. That rate is amazing because we oftentimes see like Piankir Nalar, Siege Gang Commander coming with, you know, a couple extra bodies, but this can come with 3 rats at 4 mana. It's just great. It also has an activated ability, taking out relevant creatures, making combat really difficult. Go Chittering Witch. Falcon Wrath Noble is a great Aristocrats effect. I think that a lot of people want to play it. Gaunty, Lord of Luxury. This card is a commander staple. I love how much it's been printed because other people can play with it. As a budget player, I really like when I can play with my opponent's cards because they might have some things that are interesting that I want to play with too. So Gaunty being able to steal your opponent's stuff is great. Next up, we have a very simple card. It's Grave Shifter. Now, this is like draft chaff. Of course it's cheap. 4 mana, 2/2, bring a creature back from your graveyard to your hand. Mediocre at best. But Grave Shifter has this one other line of text, Changeling. That means that it can go in so many different tribal decks. It means that the 2/2 body is more relevant than most creatures out there. And so I would actually take a look at, you know, your pirate decks, your goblin decks, your elf decks, and find out how good Grave Shifter is because I guarantee it's better than you think. Next up is Auric Lore Mage. This is an Entomb. Now I know people think that just putting a card into your graveyard is just bad. It doesn't do anything, but Entomb is a highly competitive, highly playable, and expensive card, and this is just a repeatable Entomb on a creature. It ends up being quite good. And your graveyard can often be just an extension of your hand. Like you can mess with the graveyard. Speaking of which, Vile Entomber. 4 mana, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into the graveyard. That's great. We want things in the graveyard because we can mess with the graveyard. We can cheat things into play. It's amazing. Speaking of messing with the graveyard, Rakshasa Debaser. 6 mana, 6/6. It's got Encore, but the amazing ability is this attack trigger. When it attacks, put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. All you'd have to do is attack and you just steal the most relevant creature. And Encore is insane because you just steal 3 creatures out of nowhere. It's so much fun. Next up, we have Pontiff of Blight. Yes, this is a mono black card, even though it has Extort in it, but Extort's a great mechanic because it can help you get back into the game. In multiplayer, 1 mana, dealing 1, 2, 3 damage and you gaining 3 life is a huge swing. In black, we're going for some more big creatures, Overseer of the Damned. This is a 7 mana, 5/5 flyer, but it comes in, kills something, and then you get a 2/2. By the way, whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you get a 2/2. So this is going to generate you multiple 2/2s besides the first one that you get. Tons of value. Speaking of generating 2/2s, Thieving Amalgam. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you manifest the top card of that player's library. That means that you get that card and it's manifest. You can flip it up if you have the right mana to do that. Thieving Amalgam also punishes your opponents because whenever those creatures you stole die, you drain your opponent. And so you can sometimes just send these creatures in attacking everywhere and you don't care if they die because they're doing even more damage on their death. You know, a lot of times really excellent levels of card draw is expensive. That's why I love that Greed got reprinted in Modern Horizons 2 at Uncommon. 4-mana enchantment, 1 black, 2 life, draw card. I have sunk so much mana into Greed before, and really you do have to sink a lot of life and sink a lot of mana to have this worth it. If you just spend 1 black mana into Greed, no. But over the course of a game, if you can balance it out with life gain and just use your life really aggressively, you can draw a lot of cards. All right, I've got 2 sorceries on here that bring creatures back from the graveyard. Victimize. I like Victimize in decks where you're just churning through creatures. You're not trying to cheat something big into play, but instead you're sacrificing something to get 2 somethings back. Those 2 somethings mean that you're going to outvalue your opponent. And then speaking of outvaluing, Dredge the Mire. This is amazing. People hate not having control over what creatures they get, but are your opponents putting bad creatures in their deck? No, you're going to get great things with Dredge the Mire. You're going to get 3 creatures for 4 mana in many cases. Amazing. Deadly Tempest is another board wipe. 6 mana is a lot, but I like this in decks where you want to pressure your opponent's life total and where life totals matter. Also, there are players out there that go crazy, that just flood the board with random stuff and tokens. It's kind of nice to see them punished too. All right, blue cards. Let's talk about Watcher for Tomorrow. This is just a simple 2-mana 2/1, but being able to have like an impulse effect on it, this card draw is amazing, and Flickering Watcher is really, really good. Gadwick the Wizened is great at card draw, and so playing it at 3 mana and having the ability to tap things or paying a ton of mana and drawing a bunch of cards, refilling your hand is just great. Next up, we have Conundrum Sphinx. So Conundrum Sphinx has really great stats, but if you combine this with Blue's classic top deck manipulation, whether you're tutoring things to the top, you have a top. I know that's an expensive card for the budget deck, but there's a lot of budget ways to look at the top of your library and commanders that do the same. So Conundrum Sphinx can oftentimes be a 4-mana 4/4 that's drawing you a card. It's solid. Talked about how much I love Sphinxes. Dazzling Sphinx is great. Conundrum Sphinx, you need to set it up a little bit. Dazzling Sphinx, you just smack someone in the air, which is very easy to do, and then suddenly you're cascading to an instant or sorcery from their deck. Like, yeah, you might get mana ramp, which is totally great, but what happens if you get some of their big spells? Like, there are a ton of really dangerous spells in Commander, and so Dazzling Sphinx is amazing. Next up, we have Deka Fractal Theorist. All you have to do is cast a couple instant and sorcery spells after Deka, and this is going to pay for itself. Not to mention if you have ways to storm off and create even more fractals. I mean, it could be insane levels of value. Next, we have Muldrifter. It's a divination. It's a 2/2 flyer, draw 2. It's great. Finally, another Sphinx, Inspired Sphinx, 7 mana 5/5. But when it enters the battlefield, oftentimes you're drawing 3 cards. That is over the top value. Now, I think a lot of people look at the activated ability and it feels bad. 4 mana, 1/1 flyer, that is bad. But when you have infinite mana, this just goes infinite with creatures. Or if you need a flyer, this does it. So yeah, that's just added bonus. Next, we have the only aura in the set. It's Fall from Favor. This is way better in 1v1, broken in 1v1. But there's a lot of commander decks out there that don't play enough creatures. So having the Monarch enter the game can be very, very good. And Fall from Favor, shutting down the one thing that can steal the Monarch back from you, is just great. I love how this also just replaces itself. You're like, look, I don't care. I want the Monarch anyways. This is 3 mana. It replaces itself. It makes it annoying for my opponent. That actually feels like a great tempo play. Swarm Intelligence is a little over the top. It's 7 mana, does nothing, but as soon as you cast your next instant or sorcery spell, man. Next, we have a big blue card draw spell with Commander's Insight. I love drawing cards, so sticking a bunch of mana in this and getting the added value of having a commander is just solid. Next, we have a super fun political card, Wrong Turn. I think people don't like this because it's not a traditional removal spell, but remember, if you can make sure a creature never attacks you again, then isn't that removal? So Wrong Turn essentially takes a creature from someone and gives it to someone else, but that's a political opportunity. So I love using Wrong Turn and find it to be sometimes better than a removal spell. Finally, we have a powerful sorcery, but it's slow. It's Inevitable Betrayal. 3 mana to spend 3 for a bribery. That means that you're digging in your opponent's deck for their best creature. You're stealing Eldrazi, you're stealing Craterhoofs, you're stealing expensive cards that you don't have in your budget, but now you're playing with them. And the final card is Sakashima's Will, 4 mana, and this requires a little bit of play to it, because sometimes it won't do what you want, but other times it'll be insane. It'll be 4 mana, just get your opponent's combo piece or your opponent's commander, or you have the added benefit of making your whole team something huge. You know, those 1/1 Thopters you had? Well, suddenly they're huge Sphinxes. And so this has the potential to be flexible and take over your opponent's important creature or just win the game. Finally, we have our white cards, and first up we have a little hate bear, Containment Priest. People love to cheat things into play. They love to reanimate them or flicker value pieces in and out of the battlefield, and Containment Priest shuts all that down. We have a combo with this, Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp can bring your own stuff out and back for value, but can also get your opponent's stuff out of the way. And if you have something like a Containment Priest, well, it's going to exile that card permanently. Next up, Stalking Leonin. It's a 3 mana 3/3. People have this in cat decks, but honestly, it's just solid removal, and it's political removal too. You play this, and then people just don't want to attack you. Speaking of preventing people from attacking you, Archon of Absolution. You tax your opponents, and they won't want to attack you. You know, Ghostly Prison is not a super budget card, although it's gotten cheaper. Archon of Absolution does a great imitation, and it also beats down 3/2 flyer? Yeah, protection from white? That's a lot of removal in the format. I'm a big fan of this little Archon. You know, recently Audric hasn't seen enough love, so I want to show him some here. It's Master Tactician. 2 white, and you get to mess with combat. If you're going to be attacking with a lot of creatures, you can set up the worst blocks for your opponents and the best blocks for you. It's just solid. Next up, we have Avenging Huntbonder. This is 5 mana for a 3/3 double strike, which is so-so, but this can just start distributing double striking counters. That's very good. Some creatures are broken with double strike, and so if you find those creatures, Avenging Huntbonder goes up in value a ton. All right, we've got a lot of really solid board wipes in white, and we're going to start off with the first one, Cataclysmic Gearhulk. This is not a traditional board wipe, but it definitely does shrink down the battlefield a lot because it's going to hit those artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers. And so if you have opponents that don't have balanced decks, they have like 10 planeswalkers, then they're going to be punished. Next up, we have a classic reanimator spell and combo piece, Karmic Guide. I mean, this is just a great way to get something back from the graveyard and cheat something into play. It's not the only white card getting stuff back from the graveyard. Sun Titan has dropped in price because of all the reprintings. Sun Titan gets back all those small creatures, but more importantly, it gets back lands. Also, like Fiend Hunter is a budget card, so setting up infinite combo loops on a budget is definitely doable. All right, bringing stuff back from the graveyard is Emiria Shepherd. Now this is 7 mana for a 4/4 flyer, so definitely a lot of mana, but it only takes 1 landfall trigger to make this worth it. If you play a Plains, then you get a non-land permanent card from your graveyard straight back onto the battlefield. You could get a Sun Titan back. You could get big stuff back. Realm Cloak Giant is another board wipe, but it doesn't hit your Sun Titan and it comes with a 7/7. Yes. Soul of Eternity is really just a fun over-the-top commander card. It's a 7 mana creature. That's rough, but it's got keyword big. Its power and toughness is equal to your life total, which is huge. I also like the Encore on this. 9 mana is insane to Encore, but that could win some games. All right, we're going to continue with board wipes with Out of Time. This is a 3 mana board wipe. I know that the creatures will eventually come back, but in many situations in Commander, no, they're not coming back. They're gone for forever. All right, let's protect our creatures with Valorous Stance. Let's protect your relevant creature with Valorous Stance. You've spent a lot of mana getting something important on the battlefield. Make sure it stays there. But of course, Valorous Stance has this other mode of destroying something. That's solid too. Protection and destruction, that's exactly what you want out of your instant spell. Next, we have another flexible protection spell, Unbreakable Formation. This is a protection spell, but also becomes an anthem for your opponents when you want to swing in and deal damage. Let's close out with 3 board wipes. First, we have Martial Coup. It costs a lot of mana, but you're left with 1/1s. That means that you have a board presence when your opponents don't. Cleansing Nova is flexible because you can take out all creatures or just go after those artifacts and enchantments because there are players out there that definitely abuse that. Next, we have Hour of Devastation. This is the most expensive board wipe on our list, but being able to play it for white is amazing. Rout is good because you can spend the mana on your opponent's turn and be the first to deploy. Hour of Revelation is good because you can only spend 3 mana and then again you're the first to deploy. And Martial Coup can be good because even though you're sinking a lot of mana into it, you do have a board presence afterwards. All right, let's wrap everything up with the multicolored cards. We got Priest of Fell Rites. We've talked about bringing things back from the graveyard being powerful, and this can bring 2 things back. Arumi of the Dreadtide can also bring things back from the graveyard, but it's creating multiple copies of it, taking advantage of ETBs and sending big creatures at your opponent so good. Night of Autumn has the flexibility of taking out artifacts, enchantments, gaining life, synergizing with +1/+1 counters. Soul Herder. This synergizes with all the other blinks ins and outs. I talked about Muldrifters, I talked about Night of Autumn. Blink them in and out and get extra value with Soul Herder. Trigon Predator. I have recently become a big fan of this. I did a short on this card specifically. You know, sometimes it's just great to have the threat and the ability to destroy things over and over again. So I'm a big fan of that. Hostage Shaker is more than a removal spell. You literally recruit the creature to your side of the battlefield, and stealing your opponent's stuff is awesome. Rushmi, Eternity's Crafter. This doesn't do very much when it first hits the battlefield, but all you have to do is play magic afterwards, and this is going to generate value. Geared, Conclave, Exile. I'm just attracted by the amount of power and toughness that you get for 5 mana. You get a 2/5 and a 4/4, and all you have to do is attack once, and you get another 4/4 that's tapped and attacking. That is a lot of pressure for not very much mana. The downside, 3 colors. Amori, Celebrant of the Bounty. This is just a 3/1 that has Cascade, and anything with Cascade is automatically good. You can get extra value from it. It's better than just drawing a card. But then it gives spells with converted mana cost 6 or greater Cascade. Suddenly your deck is unlocked and you can get Cascade off of everything. Super powerful. Murkfiend Liege used to be an incredibly expensive card, and now it's super budget. Just imagine pumping your team +2/+2. And giving yourself this Seedborn Muse effect. All your blue and green creatures untap. I mean, at the worst, it's Vigilance. At the best, you're getting tap and untap value every single turn. Ethereal Valkyrie. This card is so good. You need to be playing with it. And I know that 6 mana 4/4 flyer is blah, but it's this ETB and attack trigger that's amazing. So ETB and attack, draw a card, and then foretell a card from your hand. That's good because it's card draw and mana ramp, not only ETB, but every time it attacks too. And getting through in the air is going to be easy. Hamza, Guardian of the Urashin, feels like an expensive card. 6 mana 5/5, but it costs 1 less for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. That's so easy. This is very easily a green-white 5/5. And then also, it just makes all your other creature spells insane. It makes everything cheaper. You can just start stringing this into more and more creature spells. Next up, we have Magister of Worth. We have a board wipe that also gives you some presence. But Will of the Council is fun, so every so often you're going to get this mass reanimation effect, which is just a huge over-the-top ability. Next, we have Incubation Incongruity. Incubation is just a nice cantrip. You know, you go deeper, you get what you want, it's fine. But tied to it is Incongruity, which is a removal spell, which is like a beast within. It's surprisingly good that when you just want to get to your next card, you got Incubation. When you need to answer something, it's Incongruity. I know both ends aren't the best, but they're both very playable. Next, we have Escape to the Wilds. So good, it was banned in Standard. 5 mana, and you get to essentially have access to 5 cards and extra land ramp. In Gruul, this can kind of just be this big rampant card draw advantage that you need, and on the budget, that's something that we really like. And then we have Villainous Wealth, one of my favorite sorceries ever. It is so fun to play with your opponent's card. And when you sink a ton of mana into Villainous Wealth, well, you get to see a lot of your opponent's deck. And then finally, niche card, but it belongs here, and it's a great card to finish out this list. Cruel Ultimatum. Blue, blue, black, 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 red, red, super difficult to cast, and it only goes after one opponent. But oh, is that opponent punished? Look, Cruel Ultimatum is just a fun throwback to a card, maybe not even the best commander card to end with, but I know a lot of people out there that just feel joy whenever they cast a Cruel Ultimatum, and so I want you to put this in a deck that it fits, and the one day that you cast it and go after that one player that's winning, it's going to feel so good. So put that in your deck on the budget. Actually put a bunch of these cards in your deck on the budget, or just pick them up and put them in a binder so that you have a comprehensive Commander collection. You know, 18 months went by and my old list went from $25 to $50. I wonder what this list will do in another year and a half. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. If you want to pick up a bunch of these cards, go over to Cool Stuff Inc. They've actually got a lot of cool stuff. Whenever you do, use the coupon code JUMBO5 to save 5% off your order. I also want to thank my patrons. They're amazing. They're fantastic. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if you like this video or if you want me to go into more detail about these cards. Some people really want more elaborate videos on these, so let me know with the thumbs up and with the comments. All right, everyone.